Thanks for coming, Ken.
Thank you, Heath, for having me.
So my name's Heath. I'll be sitting on the stage with you and sometimes talking, but
No.
there'll be an upward inflection to my voice, signifying a question.
I'm happy, ready to go. These chairs are more comfortable than anything in my apartment, so I'm happy to be here.
So why don't we start with your Star Wars origin story? How did you first come to Star Wars and come to find such excitement in it?
As the gray in my beard will indicate, I'm part of that generation that saw the original trilogy in theaters. Return of the Jedi was my first that I remember. I was one swaddled baby in the back of a Volkswagen van, because if you're in the 70s, do it right. And I saw, what we now know as New Hope with my mom and dad. But Jedi, 7 years old, 1983, the world opened up.
And how did you fall into the fandom? Because watching the movies and enjoying them at home is one thing, but getting involved is kind of another thing.
I think if you start falling into anything that you like that has a world that opens up for you, from Harry Potter, Song of Ice and Fire, Star Trek, anything that you start, if the history and the lore starts pulling you in, that's what really grabbed me. When I remember talking to my mother, who's still to this day has seen like 2 or 3 Star Wars movies, kind of not sure what I'm talking about. I would ask her the questions. Well, Obi-Wan said that Darth Vader was Anakin, and what does that mean? The questions, and that just kind of kept pulling me in versus just, that was a fun movie. And you just get kind of sucked into the world.
Okay. And the book is a collection of what you called 100 moments. And I wanted to hear from you a little bit about the value of the moments. Could you talk about why moments are important?
Yeah, as a Star Wars fan, as we Star Wars fans, I think there's the big things that you love and the big scenes, but sometimes it even breaks down to the moments or the sounds. One of my favorite things in Star Wars is the seismic charges from Jango Fett in the Slave One and Attack the Clones, and it's just like that sound pulls me in as a Star Wars fan, and I wanted to talk about a lot of those things, as well as the big themes and all that stuff, but those are the moments that we love Star Wars, that make us love Star Wars.
Okay. And I want to do a point of clarification relatively early on in the talk, because the book focuses on the more recent expanded universe rather than kind of the original Star Wars legends. For those who don't know what I'm talking about or would like to know the difference, what is the difference and why does that matter today?
This is a dangerous question, Heath, because legend fans are very passionate. And
we are.
You are. And you might jump me in the alley afterwards. The first reason was with an expanded Disney, when they purchased it from Lucasfilm, or from George and Lucasfilm in 2012. In April 2014, they announced, hey, we got to kind of clear the slate, our canon going forward with some select things that they pulled in. We over on the ForceCenter podcast talk a lot about emotional canon, not just the facts and what the blasters are and the ships are, but there is a through line that is kind of running through modern Star Wars that connects very well. Sometimes you have to dig for it. Sometimes it's on the screen or on the page for you. So it just, number one, it's kind of easier to write from that point of view. And then personally, like I loved Timothy Zahn's Heir to the Empire trilogy. I read Kevin J. Anderson's 94, 95 Jedi Academy trilogy. And then after that, I wasn't pulled into Legends as much. But I always have to speak of that carefully, because a lot of the characters, Mara Jade, for example, that was a very inspirational character for a lot of fans for a lot of time. So I never mean to discredit that or throw it aside. Legends has got some silly stuff in it. Luke, the clone, Emperor Palpatine had a son with 3 eyes called Triclops. Chewie dies by a moon. All those kind of things aren't my favorite, but I never want to discount it, because that's why we love Star Wars too.
And is there a bright line between the two in terms of what's included or excluded, or is it just kind of a time from before this doesn't matter, after this matters? Yeah,
they in April 2014 they announced, Clone Wars, the animated series, was pulled in, but not the first one, not the Tartakovsky one, but that had been cleared a long time ago. Dark Horse lost the comic license, so Marvel got it. So everything from there, except for 4 issues of a Darth Maul comic. So they kind of announced all that kind of stuff, and then, of course, the movies. But now, even then, I mean, they pull it back. I loved when not only did Thrawn shows back up in Star Wars Rebels, the animated cartoon series, but the Rook, his bodyguard, and Warwick Davis played him, voiced him, and like that is great. So I like that they can pull stuff back, that it's still in play.
And that's interesting because one of the things that Disney acquired was the character library. And there are so many characters from the original comics, from the original books, that they can tap into. I appreciate, one of the things I appreciate most about the book is that you're relatively media agnostic. It draws on the comics, it draws on the novels, it draws on the movies, it draws on video games. Talk a little bit about why that was important to you.
Again, it's part of this expansion as a fan. Your heart's big enough to take all this stuff in, and now that a lot of it matters, Galaxy's Edge, which is opening up for the first time ever, we have to ask ourselves as fans: are there theme park spoilers? Because the park has story elements to it. So the video games have canon-related stories, and so that adds value to it. And there's a lot of great writing. The character of Iden Versio that Gina Gavankar plays in Battlefront 2, the story side of it, it's this great character who was raised in the Empire by two parents, one an artist mother, one a military father, to believe that the Empire was the ones bringing peace and security to the galaxy. And she has a fascinating point of view as she struggles with that, starts to see it for what it is, and basically walks away from the family business. That's pretty deep in a video game. And then there's also, on Battlefront 2, which is this, multiplayer online game, they have this mode called Ewok Hunt, which you are a stormtrooper lost on Endor after the Battle of Endor with 12 of your mates, and you have a flashlight that goes out every 60 seconds, and you hear the Ewoks hunting you. And, that was one of the more chilling things I've ever seen in Star Wars. You think the Ewoks are cute and cuddly, you hear in the background, and you know you're about to be eaten by them. It's just part of being a Star Wars fan, and so I felt I had to cover those things as well.
That's interesting. One of the notes I made in the margin was the Ewoks are cannibals. You mentioned, just to build on that, you mentioned also some cross-genre stuff. Star Wars is largely considered science fiction. There's space opera in there. There's a tie to the original serial films. But that Ewok example, I think you described as like sheer and utter terror or horror. Could you talk a little bit about kind of other moments of other genres popping up in Star Wars that you've seen as you've kind of consumed and voraciously read and seen so much?
Yeah, I think one of the ones that comes up a lot is you hear Western. Han Solo himself, kind of this classic Western character. I think in Rogue One, you can consider Darth Vader in the hallway horror. He's a monster. My friend Mark Riley over on Collider Video, who hosted a horror podcast over there, he's like, that's a horror character. It's the monster in the hallway chasing you down, and it's pretty vicious, which is why a lot of people liked it. We finally got to see Vader being the murderous monster we always knew he could be. So I think there's that. Obviously the romance stuff. And there's always this conversation of, will Star Wars ever just go straight genre? I don't think you can. It's always going to be Star Wars. You're not going to have a Star Wars rom-com, but it's possible.
Kind of the Archie license model,
right.
Just modernize Star Wars. You mentioned kind of what drew you to the fandom in terms of how it felt and your mother. What was your first fandom experience? Was it a convention, or what was your first interaction with other fans in kind of an organized way?
I mean, I'm trying. There could be the Slumber Party, in which I saw the Return of the Jedi trailer, and that was a little mini convention.
Was there a flyer?
Flyer passed out, and then on the playgrounds in the '80s, you and I were talking off air before here that when you found a friend at school that liked Star Wars, that was a currency that you had, because and this built-in connection that. Thankfully, now it's easier to find fans. You and I are wearing T-shirts of things we love. That wasn't always the case. I got bullied, and actually, kid choked me from behind in third or fourth grade because I had a Return of the Jedi shirt on, and nerd. So all that's changed and grown, and then the conventions as it become more popular. I think 2011, and I was a late bloomer for that stuff. That's the first time I walked in. And just like, oh, I'm surrounded by all the people and the things I loved, and that just feels good. And I'll take that even with some of the negative stuff that comes with it.
Mentioning things makes me think about the toys. In the book, you described the Kenner action figures as being the ultimate marketing strategy. Could you talk a little bit about kind of the viral propulsion of Star Wars and what kind of tools you think were used to get it so far and so wide?
I think it starts with the toys, and George Lucas deserves a ton of credit, or it just was dumb luck that he was like, yeah, let's make sure we got these toys and a toy license. And if you watch that documentary series on Netflix, The Toys That Made Us, by Brian Volk-Weiss and his team, like they really do a great job. That first episode talks about the figures, and there's a kind of professor type character talking about you get to take that movie home with you. And I think throughout the time period of the early 80s, particularly when me and my friends would meet up, not to record a podcast like we do now, but we'd meet up to bring our figures, dump them in a pile, and create our own stories. So your thirst for Star Wars just continued to grow, and the continuing adventures and what was around the corner. And I think that's kind of where it all began. It just, and everything, the toy boom happened in the 80s, and these are the toys that made us. But as much as I love G.I. Joe and He-Man and all these things I grew up with, including My Little Ponies,
Another crossover
crossover opportunity. They're out there. They're in the unknown regions. That was what Palpatine was searching for. I think we're going to get that in 9. Nothing quite comes to Star Wars when it comes to the toys. That take-home feel. It's in your hands.
And my understanding is that it also played a role in the business for Lucas, because is it true that he held on to the license or something like that, and that affected the franchise kind of as being a stable platformer, at least his role in it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the finer points of it are sometimes up for debate, but it's fascinating. That's something that they wanted, something he wanted. He was making cereals for his childhood. The Flash Gordon cereals. He was trying to capture that and the feeling of toys and some of the fun things, and that was it just made sense to him. And it messed it up for everyone else. No one else would ever get that great of a deal. And now marketing and 80s, the boom of toys. It just seems like. I was a big comic book fan, but really I was just reading commercials for toys. So it definitely changed, but I think he got there first.
Okay. How do you think fandom has changed from hanging out with your friends at the slumber party, the convention in 2011? Have you seen anything happen in terms of the fan base or in terms of kind of the organization?
A darkness has risen. No, we all have very passionate opinions. We all have a way to get those opinions out. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I will take all the bad that sometimes comes with it. I haven't been into the YouTube comment section on our show, Collider Jedi Council, in 4 years. I just can't. I have just...
Not mining it for episode ideas.
Just enough self-esteem left to not go in there. I'm okay with it. I'm okay with the trade-off of social media because it connects us. I can now talk to a Star Wars fan in the UK and over Twitter and have a connection with them, or someone in southeast region of the United States when I'm out here, and I never had that, and that's very valuable. But everyone's got opinions. Everyone's a screenwriting expert. Everyone's a directing expert, a marketing expert, and that's okay. And we all have our podcasts to talk about it. And again, I think that's okay. That's part of the fun. I do, though, wish that word was still in people's brain. Fun. This is supposed to be fun.
Okay. Well, I enjoyed that you mentioned sound. You mentioned kind of the depth charges from that one ship. And in the book, you talk several times about Ben Burtt and the importance of the sound design in the movie. Either the blaster fire sound, the ship sound, the lightsaber sound. What role do you think sound plays? Outside of the music, which is a separate topic, right. But what role do you think sound plays?
I absolutely believe it's one of the most important things, and Ben Burtt is an absolute genius, as are just pretty much any sound designer and all the folks that work behind the scenes and all these things. Just watching that documentary on Game of Thrones, The Last Watch, and just seeing, regardless of what you thought of this final scene, it doesn't matter what they put into it. It's just the magic of movie making that pulls us all in. And I think Burtt, I start the first essay I write about is the sounds of the blasters. Pew, pew, pew. It becomes a meme, becomes something we wear in T-shirts as a joke. And he created that sound out in the wild with a recorder hitting a wire cable, and it made sense the moment he heard it. That sounds like a space gun, but I'm making it on a hill. I think it was, I forget, maybe California, I forget where it was, but I think it stayed with us. The TIE fighters, the lightsaber, all those sounds. It's part of being a fan.
Other than Bert, are there any other people behind the scenes who you think should be less unsung heroes, or who you think played a role that's not necessarily as visible?
Marcia Lucas is the first one. Marcia Lucas was George's wife at the time. She was brought in. Paul Hirsch and Richard Chew also are editors on New Hope, so credit deserved there too. But Marcia came in because the first edit was historically bad. And you see some clips, you can find some clips online, and it's like, oh, this was not going to work. She comes in. I think she was working on a Scorsese film at the time. He says, "Yeah, sure, Georgie, take her for a little bit." She saved that film in editing, and unfortunately, we don't know. The relationship ends by the time of Return of the Jedi. I think she did work on Jedi, and she kind of's been written out bluntly. She has been, and I think now there's people are aware of that. I grew up knowing like. Marcia, I'd see her on credits, and you'd see some behind the scenes. That the Return of the Jedi, they're editing the Rancor scene. I remember seeing a clip where she's in a picture. So it's like I knew as a kid who she was, but she is not talked about as much and should be. Save that film. Gary Kurtz, who recently passed away, George's producing partner in the first two films, probably grounded George. I'm one of the ones I love the creator. He's George. He's the reason I'm here. Like for all the good and bad. So I don't ever want to discredit what he did. He sat down with a pad of paper in about 73 and started writing himself. But Gary Kurtz comes along and was critical when he needed to be, stood up to George when he needed to be, all these stories. And I think he has just as much to do with a lot of the success. Ed Charles Lippincott, who was within the promotions, he's the one going, there's this thing in San Diego where a bunch of comic book people get together around card tables. Let's go down there and let's market. And I think that Star Wars and marketing goes hand in hand.
I really enjoyed, there were moments in the book that seemed like almost offhand trivia or things that you could have spent more time on but chose not to. There was I think a section on Claudia Gray's book, The Journey to Star Wars, Leia, and a moment in that book that ended up being so contextual and tying things together that later were important but had been missing in the past. You mentioned Katie Lucas, another family member, one of his children, working on the Clone Wars cartoon, even the cartoon airing out of chronological order, which matters, to be honest.
It does. It
really does. Or Lucas being an aspiring race car driver. What do you think about those details, kind of as micro moments or almost moments? Why does stuff like that matter?
I think that someone smarter than me can maybe explain it, but as part of that fandom, I'm a Beatles fan and a Beatles nut, and it's like I have a book that details every professional day of the Beatles from late 50s to April 1970, and I was reading that at 14. Why? Why did I need to know what Ringo was doing for press on this day in 1967? We just take it all in, and so the history of George being, wanting to be a race car driver, crashing, nearly losing his life, but he still has an obsession with speed and fast things. The speeder bike sequence, one of my favorite things. The pod race, which I love, and the sounds, talk about Ben Burtt again. It's just, I think when you really dive into something, you want to know all this. And that's the dividing line between things you like. I like Marvel films. I like the MCU. I didn't read a lot of those comics growing up. I read the G.I. Joes and everything. So I appreciate it. I go see the movies and I like it. But one of my writing partners, a guy named Matt Key, hosts a Marvel podcast, he just, every little detail is there for him. So he's in that world. Mine is Song of Ice and Fire, Game of Thrones, Star Wars, Robotech, another thing from the 80s where you can get me started on, so Lisa Hayes becomes the Admiral. We just love everything, and that includes the behind the scenes things. It just fuels, and it becomes a weird contest. Star Wars trivia is something weird.
You know more than I do, just to be clear.
Yeah, I am involved in something called the Movie Trivia Schmodown. Great thing. It's competitive movie trivia. We go around, do tours, we're a YouTube show, all that stuff. And yeah, one of the biggest matches, I defeated Sam Witwer, who was voice of Darth Maul in a trivia battle, and then he took the title back. And it's crazy, the minutia, and how I don't know why. I know people's middle names. It's just silly.
Does the memory spill over to other things in life?
I'm forgetting more and more as I grow up, as I grow old. I don't know why. I don't know why I know Zev Sineska is Rogue 2 in Empire Strikes Back. There's no reason other than I just know it.
That's really cool. Thank you for mentioning the Flash Gordon serials. In preparation for today, I watched The Phantom Menace again and was again delighted and thrilled by the wipes. Could you talk to me a little bit about the wipes?
Those Lucas wipes, I mean, they're just as much as part of Star Wars as anything. And I think there's a few of them in the sequel trilogy. I can't remember. I think Ryan put one in. I know I'm recalling. It's just, and it became like much like J.J. Abrams and lens flares or something later on. It almost like George was like, we got to have these wipes. This is what I was pulled into as a kid. Flash Gordon serials and the diamond wipes and everything. I love it.
Oh, the diamond wipe, and it becomes like another moment because it's a structural consistency, which becomes an intertextual thread throughout the films. But I was surprised they were in the prequel trilogy. I had forgotten that he did them there too. Your book is a lot of fun because other books about Star Wars have focused on more serious aspects of the franchise. There have been books about the hero's journey, the Christian allegory, and your book doesn't really touch on that at all. What was the idea behind the book, and what were you trying to set out to accomplish when you started?
I mean, I think, it's so funny. As I was writing, I kind of wrote the book in chronological order. It's 100 through number 1. I try to say it's not a ranking up for debate. Your list is more important than mine. These are just my moments. But I found when it comes to some of the themes, almost like you're repeating yourself sometimes, because we all know them. We all know the hero's journey. We all know that George studied Joseph Campbell. And I think there's smarter people than me that can explain it. I'm here. I love the deep themes. I mean, there's stuff in there that I remember breaking down a scene, writing Daisy Ridley as Rey, discovering that, I thought Luke Skywalker was a myth. It was one of my favorite scenes. She's talking to Finn, and you could break down, every little look on her face, what it means. So I love getting deep. But again, I've never left being 7 and looking up and seeing some guy dressed in all black with a laser sword and going, whoa, what is that? And those are the moments that make me love Star Wars. The themes are obviously very present, but this is a fan's journey.
Okay. Well, let's talk more about some of your favorite moments then. We're not going to count down the 100 because we don't have the time, but I want to talk about kind of, if we look at the cross media, so video game moment, book moment, comic moment, movie moment, music moment, make up your own other category. But if you could just kind of give us like one from each kind of cross media example.
That's great. Video games, my favorite. I mean, again, I don't know the number. I forget, but it's in Battlefront 2 in the story mode. You get to control Luke Skywalker for a mission voiced by an old friend of mine, Matt Mercer from Critical Role, and he did a great job. And I was talking to him about it. And Mitch Dyer wrote the scene, and they go into this deep philosophy about choice and the choice to be better. And he's with an Imperial agent there, part of the Special Forces team, and they're working together. And the guy's like, why are you helping me? And he's like, well, Luke's like, well, you asked. And he's like, well, you just killed a bunch of stormtroopers. He's like, they didn't give me the choice. They didn't ask. They didn't choose to be better. And, meanwhile, it's a video game, so you're hacking.
That's slashing. A lot for a video game.
Yeah. But it is one of the most pure Luke Skywalker moments in all of Star Wars. And it's here in this video game, and it's pretty fascinating. So I wrote about that. Book moments. There's a lot. One that it's a small one that I put in there, and it's a book called Most Wanted by Ray Carson, which is kind of a novel 2 years before the events of Solo, a Star Wars story. And there's this great moment with the character of Kira, played by Emilia Clarke, she has this moment with Han, because in the movie she has the, I know you're a good guy and you think you're the smuggler and scoundrel. And I love that moment. It's a thesis statement on Han's life. He's always struggling with who he is and who he wants to pretend to be or thinks he is or feels he has to be. There's this moment a couple years earlier that he's talking to her and he's giving her a lot of credit and everything, and it's the first time in life it wasn't like he was enlightening her, like she's like, oh, you're right, I am those things. She was like, for the first time, someone's taken the moment to see who I am and see who I know I am. And it was a real special moment, I thought, for the character of Han Solo, who is a scoundrel, right? He is this stuff, but it's easy to go, yeah, Han's got a good heart. He's got a heart of gold. But to me, it was the first time that was really explained, especially from a female character's point of view, of just like, he's not hitting on me. I'm not a conquest. He's just literally, he sees who I know I am. And I thought that was a great moment for Han, and a valuable moment that adds to some depth to Solo. Yeah, and as far as movie moments, I don't know. We can go into, there's a ton.
Pick one.
Pick one.
It doesn't have to be the best or your favorite, but just
Yeah.
one that you think is important to talk about.
I wrote about, and I won't say the number, but it's high up, and I wrote about the moment where Shmi Skywalker gives up her son Anakin, and he walks away. And I remember it was one of the moments I loved in 1999 in the teaser trailer. It's, Anakin's, will I ever see you again? What does your heart tell you? And the mothers in Star Wars don't always get the spotlight or as much credit. We got a great father-son story, father-daughter story with Vader and everything, and that's good. I love Galen Erso, Jen Erso in Rogue One. That's a powerful moment there when she discovers that he not only is alive, but he didn't leave her for the Empire like she grew up thinking. But I love this moment that this mother feels as though there's a greater destiny, and this, giving him up to the Jedi and is easier said than done. Giving up your son to this life, this destiny, and she did such a good job of instilling a good heart in Anakin that I really believe George connects it back to his redemption moment in Episode 6. Vader does horrible things, and in 83 we just accepted he's good now. Now we can go into more layered stuff about what he did and was he really redeemed? He wasn't redeemed for the galaxy. No one else knew. It was all, there's a book by Claudia Gray, Bloodline, 7 years before Force Awakens, where it's discovered that Leia is the daughter of Vader, and that does not go well because people still view him as Vader. So Vader's redemption was probably different than we thought growing up. But I think it ties back to that moment, the faith of this mother, the strength. It's one of the strongest moments in Star Wars. And, I felt needed to cover it, prequels and all.
And an interesting scene, having just seen the movie, because I think the response to her is, well, I didn't come here to free slaves, which upon first watching, I interpreted as, I can't also take you with me, but I can only take him.
Yeah.
And that's a challenging moment. A comic book moment that you think is worth exploring.
There's a moment by a writer, Chuck Wendig, who also wrote a bunch of novel stuff too that I wrote about. I actually I have a Jar Jar Binks moment because the epilogue of Jar Jar Binks is in this Aftermath Empire's End book. It's just really wonderful meta comment on the fandom. There's a great moment with him and Darth Vader. It's a little small moment. It's a little panel where he's back handling something on Geonosis, where all the events of Attack the Clones happened, and he's in the arena where he, was nearly executed with Padme and Obi-Wan and everything. And it's just this, you turn the page, you're not expecting it. And it was this beautiful moment that talked about Vader. Vader does have a past, and Vader does hurt, which is why he's always at war with Palpatine. And they cover that a lot in New Canon. Another moment I love is there's a moment, a Poe Dameron comic issue 14 is the one in which Leia, and it was released only a couple months after Carrie Fisher passed away, and she talks about, I won't always be here, and we are all luminous, and she quotes Yoda, and she's giving Poe this big lesson, but it's also the importance of seeing beyond yourself, and I think it was a powerful lesson for older fans, particularly, who can gatekeep and who can get hoard all of our toys, literally and figuratively. And it was a moment to Poe, like you want to be the rogue pilot, you want to be this, but you were meant for more, and you have a responsibility to be more and think of the other people coming up behind you. And it was, to me, a real moment, for a final lesson from even Carrie Fisher, who was a fascinating character. I was fortunate enough to moderate a panel with her, and the moments, she's great, she's fed, she sang the Life Day song, and she's Carrie Fisher, but to see a young girl about 10 come up and say, how can I be like you? And then to see like a girl 16, 17 come up and be like, I struggle with mental illness. And the conversation wasn't about Star Wars. And just, so a lot of wisdom can come from Carrie Fisher's life and her failures and her successes. And it was all in this comic book. And there was this great frame. You turn, it's her face. And it's a tear-inducing moment because it was only a couple months after she had passed.
Was that intentional or the publication accidental?
I don't, because, for the lead time on some of those, I don't know. It's in story. It's keeping with what goes on in 8 with Poe Dameron's arc and everything, all that. But it was pretty direct. It's on her face, and it's a comic book drawing, and sometimes the art can be. It looks like a portrait of Carrie Fisher, and she says, I won't always be here. As a fan, you're like, oh man, it was yeah, but it's great.
Blew your mind.
It's deep.
Yeah. All right. We're going to open it up to questions in a couple of minutes, but before we do, you mentioned several other things that you've been a fan of over your life. You mentioned professional wrestling, Robotech, which you mentioned on stage today, and baseball cards. Anything else attract the energy and passion that Star Wars has, or come close?
I mean, recently, Game of Thrones, Song of Ice and Fire. I was I didn't read the books before. Then once the first season came, I was like, all right, I gotta dive in. And I am the type that literally has the maps, and I just pull them out and I study the maps.
They can't get there that fast.
They can't get there that fast. I got to take a Raven. So that pulled me in really fast, and that world. Yeah, there's a lot of. I'm a big Douglas Adams, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy fan. That grabbed my attention a lot in late 80s, early 90s, too. There was a weird time where Star Wars, I say the dark times of Star Wars, but late 80s, it was this thing in the past. And Zahn's Heir to the Empire novel, which is why I will always cherish that one, even though he gave the galaxy hot chocolate in that. That was like, oh, Star Wars is still around. And that's pretty bad. So there was time, there was a point in my life where I pulled my toys off the shelf because I thought I had to, and now they're back up.
Anything you regret getting rid of that you wish you'd held on to?
Yeah. I have almost everything from my childhood, almost everything. But in about 1985, I sold my lunchbox full of Star Wars figures at a garage sale for $2 because I wanted a skateboard. And my parents were like, all right, well, you seem motivated. I have muscles. I have GoBots. I have Garbage Pail Kids. I have everything. I don't have my Kenner Star Wars figures. And that skateboard a year later got sold so I could get a catcher's mitt and play baseball. So,
what deck did you get?
I don't even remember. It was a used deck. It had like white the grip tape all over it. And I couldn't skateboard. I fell off and was like, done with this. I'm going to play a catcher in baseball. And those Star Wars figures. I kept one survived. It was the AT-AT Commander, which is supposed to be General Veers, and I had my Y-Wing, and those are the only things that survived.
The Y-Wing.
The Y-Wing and General Veers, yeah.
We've got a bobble box in front, so feel free to pick that up, and questions from the fans in the audience, and non-fans and other people.
Yeah, I think that as far as fan culture goes, Star Wars has been sort of a long enough cultural institution that you're now getting people who were fans of it growing up getting put in charge of sort of new works in it. And I was going to ask, what do you think that there's necessarily a bright line between sort of fan culture and fan works and the sort of the canon itself, if that makes sense?
It's a great question because I think everything not made by George Lucas is fan fiction, and I don't mean that in a bad thing. And it's a weird time too, where I know a couple people that are creating Star Wars things, and it's like, but we hang out and have drinks. Like, you can't be creating Star Wars. And it's for me, it's important to remember that we're all passionate, and it inspires us. I love that Star Wars inspires people that work for NASA or people that might be here, that you're not doing, you're not writing something, but Star Wars has inspired you another way. So I like it. Some of the fan fiction stuff, some of the fan films, I think are great, passionate. I don't like when fans grab onto those as, oh, finally we solved something that was wrong with George's work. It's really odd, but it's interesting, and it's a weird. J.J. Abrams is a huge Star Wars fan. I don't get the sense that he could win a trivia contest with it, and I think that's okay because he can go tell his story. But we're in a weird time because once George decided to step away, it was all ours now in a way.
And so, sort of going into the future, obviously there's going to be more Star Wars media. So I think it's fair to say that there's sort of somewhat of a theme of like things getting passed down generations or like recurrence in the franchise. And I was just wondering, do you think that it will at some point reach a point where like it feels too much like they're sort of rehashing the same stories, or do you think that they'll manage to keep it, fresh?
I think there's always, you hear that phrase, Star Wars poetry. George loved to use it. I think without a doubt, I love Force Awakens, but JJ had to kind of bring the elements back in. We'll see. I'm very curious what to see after 9 with things like Mandalorian, the Cassian Andor series. Even though it's a character in another film, it might be the first, talking about genres, it could be the first Star Wars like spy series or thriller like that. People always we want new things, so we don't want to rehash anything. But then sometimes I am a fan of Last Jedi. I die on that hill, but it brought some new things that people didn't like, and so it's just weird. But and I don't want to get into the weird battle back and forth, but it's like Episode 7 seemed familiar, and some people didn't like that. Episode 8 seemed completely new. People didn't like that. It's tough, but we'll see the new movies. If they go Old Republic, is that going to be too much? People going, we already played that video game, or is it going to take us into new places? It's something you constantly have to be, I think, worried about if you're a Star Wars creator.
Sorry.
Something new, but something familiar.
So one thing that's interesting about Star Wars is because of that dark period, people kind of dug into every tiny little thing and made action figures of every single background character. So what's your favorite tiny Star Wars thing that someone spun off into a bigger story or a bigger cosplay or whatever?
I think one of the ones I get in this weird discussion, Admiral Akbar. Everyone loves Akbar, and when he didn't get a funeral or a hero send-off, everyone had a problem with it. But it's like he was this fish dude that said it's a trap, and no one cared. Like no one. I wasn't on the playgrounds in '83 going, "That's a trap." Like we didn't connect to that. But the fact that it later on did. Veers, I love. I have this weird obsession with Imperial officers. One of my favorite Star Wars characters is Moff Tion Jer Gerard, who runs the second Death Star, because in the novel, it came out in '83, there's this great internal monologue with Jer Gerard running to meet Vader, and he has this philosophy of great men never hurry, great men cause others to hurry, and it's this weird monologue of this dude that's just like, yes, sir. Yeah, you're right away, sir. And it's just like, I love that. So I love that kind of stuff. The card games, I always joke, like, Ponda Bob is still Walrus Man to me, but it's that, and a lot of the legend stuff. It's so great to go into Wikipedia and just get Wu Hare, the bartender's entire life story, just sprawled out.
Have you mapped the org chart
The what
for the
chart?
officers? The organization?
Oh
chart?
no, the org chart. No, I
Or
have.
has anyone else?
There need to be. There needs to be. It's just, I don't know what it is, because the Empire is the bad guys, the bad team. I get it. I love some of the nuance that's coming in of some of these people who've grown up with the perspective of, well, I don't know, Empire showed up and crime went down in my neighborhood. Like, it's interesting, but I don't know what it is. It's Lorth Nita on the ground choking in front of Vader when he really was went to take responsibility for what he did wrong. It's just, I don't know. There's something. I love it.
A lot of turnover in the Empire.
A lot of room for growth. It depends on how you look at it.
Other questions?
Hey, Ken.
Hey.
I got to thank you and everyone else on Jedi Council. You guys have truly put me on to Star Wars. I've always been aware of, how popular it is, but listening to it sometimes at work or just at home, not at work, or just at home, just the passion and the enthusiasm that you guys have for it makes me excited. So it's really raised my interest in learning more about Star Wars. So I'm not the super fan. I don't know all the information.
You don't need to be.
Yeah, but
Just
I'm curious about how do you, or maybe there's a website or something, but how do you know the chronology of everything with the movies, the TV shows, the comic books, video games? Do they make it easy for people to know, all right, I'm playing this game, it takes place before this movie, or how do you guys figure that out?
They try, and every Del Rey Star Wars novel has a Del Rey Star Wars timeline in the front of the book. Wikipedia is a great resource. A friend of mine runs a YouTube channel called Star Wars Explained, and it's not explained. It's just this hey, here's the base level. He does a canon timeline every year, and he updates it. And sometimes, unfortunately, I got to say, we just no, because we waste too much time on, well, the Bothans came before. So it's just kind of part of it. But yeah, there's some resources out there. I really would say go to Wikipedia. Not a big shout out for them, but like a lot of us, I mean, even Star Wars creators pop in and go, oh, okay, right, yeah, we can use this character. He shows up at this time.
Awesome. Thank you, Kylo Ken.
Thank you.
While we wait, I have another question.
Yeah.
I just thought of the role-playing games, which we haven't talked about. Back in the Legends days, West End games actually introduced a lot of stuff that got pulled in to the broader storyline. And the current role-playing game is absolutely beautiful in its materials and design. Have you had any exposure or experience with that aspect?
I have not. It's so weird. When I finally lost some of these big trivia contests that I was competing in, a lot of it was to this kid, Alex Damon, who runs Star Wars Explained, and my friend Joseph Scrimshaw from ForceCenter. And the reason was, like, specifically with Joseph, he played those games. So I joke, but every once in a while, and I'm like, oh, yeah, Hammerhead. They're like, no, that's Momon Nadon. I'm like, oh, okay. I didn't play. I was in the late 80s. I was collecting baseball cards and thought I was going to play catcher for the New York Yankees. That dream ended in 1990 when I was 13. So yeah, it's really important. The West End games, I think, are really important to the history of Star Wars. It took what you're talking about. Walrus Man becomes Ponda Baba, who works with Dr. Cornelius Evanson, who was a plastic surgeon gone crazy. Like, that came from that kind of stuff.
From the audience.
Yep, we got it here. So I want to go back to the toy line a little bit, and I'm just curious as to what your opinion is on the new retro range that are essentially taking the old Kenner figures, repackaging, and now selling in Target. What are your thoughts on that?
They're trying to get my money, right? They're trying to. I push 10-year-olds out of the way. Well, it's interesting. I don't know all the stats and figures, but there is. This is just I'm at my girlfriend's here. Every time we're in Target, I'm like, I need to go check the toy aisle again. I don't think kids are buying in toys as much, and I don't mean to make that a general sweeping generational thing, but it's guys like me that are like, the Kenner figures are back. No, they're not. They're just marketed to look like they are. So I think it's interesting. I think it's smart. Because I know a lot of my friends are like, did you see the Tarkin? They got a Tarkin. Yeah, and so I think it's interesting. I don't know. But then I see a lot of them just sitting on the shelves.
Yeah. Well, if it helps, my 3-year-old loved the retro line that I got him this weekend.
See, there's hope for the future.
Yeah, exactly.
So if someone wanted to make their own, not Star Wars, but their own fictional universe, is there a formula or is there kind of like a recipe that you've learned from all these magic moments in Star Wars that could be applied to creating other fictional worlds?
It's a great question. I've failed many times on my own to do this. I think you start with a simple story. You start small. That's why George, in the end, probably went with episode 4. And then you can build around from there. But also, I think, if you make it seem real, and that includes the struggles and the problems, and that's what I think George R. R. Martin's done so well. I love George R. R. Martin's statement on he loves Tolkien, but Tolkien never wrote about Aragorn's tax policies and how that's where George loves to live. So I think Star Wars, I think George Lucas loves to live that more than people know. Prequels come along. At the time in 99, I was not on board for the politics. Now I crave it even more in 7, 8, and 9. I wish we had, in episode 7, you see Hosnian Prime and Chancellor Vilcham and Corcella, Leia's envoy, explode and die, and they have 10 seconds on screen. It's an entire fascinating subplot of Leia sent Corcella to beg the government to listen to her that the threat was coming, and it's like, that's the world. And so, but I think, though, you have to start really small and just add the layers.
So I was wondering, how does Star Wars fandom and, say, Star Trek, the other big one, get along? Is there tension between these, or is there crossover?
Not as much anymore, but I had a friend in high school. Shout out to Steve Morrissey, our drum major at Arroyo Grande High School. He was a Star Trek fan, and we used to we would get into some pretty intense debates, which is silly because I loved the TV, Next Generation. I love Q, I love Picard, I love all that stuff. But I would pretend like I didn't. I don't know why. And the day Gene Roddenberry died, I passed him the halls, and Steve was crying, and I went to go consult, like, hey, sorry. And he's like, I don't want to hear it now. I was like, I know, I'm very sorry. Over time, we realize, this isn't life or death. But I think it's important to have the differences and discuss it, but to also realize two totally different things. Dorina and I argue all the time over Star Trek right now. All the time.
When we were going through your kind of media moments, we neglected cartoons and the music in terms of John Williams' score.
Yeah.
Could you touch on those two before we close?
The animated shows, and then I think, animated shows. Remember in the 80s we had droids and Ewoks, and it's like, ooh, we don't have those anymore. Clone Wars comes along, and the first season at times had some rough moments. The movie in 2008 absolutely is rough. It's good. It's got some good stuff. But then Zero the Hutt shows up, and it's like, I'm Zero the Hutt. And you're like, what am I watching, George? If you stick with it and you try to watch it in the right order, it makes a little more sense. It gets into so many wonderful things. It makes the character of Padme even that much more important. It takes Ahsoka, this 13-year-old, preteen, 12, 13-year-old preteen girl who's snipping with, her nickname is, Snips, and she's kind of precocious, just grows into this marvelous character and adds a lot of depth. And then Star Wars Rebels comes along, Dave Filoni and his team, and same kind of thing happens. One of my all-time favorite moments in Star Wars is in there with Obi-Wan and Darth Maul, well, just Maul facing off one final time, and it's my second favorite lightsaber fight, because we Star Wars fans rank things all the time. It's my second favorite lightsaber fight. It lasts 10 seconds once the actual fighting starts, but it's about the power. It's about the lessons of power and how you define power, and it's this really deep philosophical stuff for this show on, I'd be watching it, tears in my eyes, that it would go to break and be like, here, the Nerf flyer, come by. It's like, oh, this is for kids, right? Oh, gosh. So I think it's fascinating. As far as the score, George Lucas, no secret, calls John Williams the secret sauce of Star Wars. I think other people have done a great job. I really love John Powell's score for Solo. Kevin Kiner on TV deserves a lot of credit for what he's done on Clone Wars and Rebels. I think we've all seen that video online of the throne room scene in New Hope with no music, score, anything, and it's wonderfully comical. But George made a choice to have big score in an era of disco. Could you imagine if Star Wars, like, he made that choice. That's one of the things you have to give George credit for, and John Williams, who was already known at the time.
So when you're walking down the street alone with your Walkman on and nobody's watching, what piece is playing in your head?
I have a few. I have one of my favorite one is Padme's Ruminations, Duel of Fates, obviously. But I'll tell you the one I hum the most to myself, and I'm not great at humming, is the Ewok theme. The doo 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 doo. That's in my head constantly, whether it's playing or not.
Do you walk like an Ewok?
I wish I could.
Okay. Are there any other questions? Yes.
So Star Wars, that's purely fictional. Can you relate anything in Star Wars to the real world?
Yeah, I think you can relate a lot, which is the genius of not just George, but anyone who tells these modern fantasies and these modern fables. But the moment that I think might best, be the best example of it is in New Hope, the twin sunset scene, which is Luke stuck at home with his aunt and uncle who don't want him to leave, and his friends have gone, and he feels as though, he's stuck here, and I think we've all been there, and I think that was one of the scenes that made it such, there's a lot of factors, but I still think that's one of the scenes that connects over and over and over with each generation, is him staring out, and it's two suns on a desert planet that's all a desert in another galaxy and far, far away, all those things, but we've all at one point been there going, there's a life out there, and I can't get it, but I still want to believe, and I think that's what the biggest moment that sticks out to me.
Well, thank you very much, Ken, for coming today.
Thank you. Thank you.